Okay, our demonstration tonight is Bill Fordney. He's making chess pieces using repetitive turning technique. And Bill has been turning for a few years. And how many years have you been turning?
Oh my, I don't know.
Okay, he doesn't know. That means a good bit. Okay. Well, welcome. Come on up and.
Okay. Okay, first of all, how many people here play chess or can play chess? Okay, how many have chess sets? And is what you have the typical one like this? This is called a Staunton set. It was named after a past Grandmaster, Howard Staunton, designed around the middle of the 1800s. It's the typical set that tournaments are played with now. But what I've done here is I've got some other pictures just to show you things that are not wood that can be chess sets. That's porcelain. It's from Portugal. And you can see that the color of the porcelain is the blue and the cream color. And obviously black and white. Chess is basically black versus white, although it's blue versus white or whatever. That's a Yadro set, porcelain. Yadro is a place in Spain that
Valencia, Spain.
Valencia, Spain.
It's
And
pronounced as if the first letters a B.
What's that?
It's pronounced as if the first.
I don't care how they pronounce it, Bill. I'm telling you, it's from Spain. And I don't care who was there. It's from Spain. And I can tell you, if you ever get to a place where there's a store that sells Yadro stuff, go in and look at it. It is absolutely exquisite. But take your wallet if you're going. I'll tell you.
Before you go in the door.
Yeah, in fact, there was a shop in the Venetian out in Las Vegas where I lived for a while, and they had a Yadro shop there, and I went in and I was looking at the chess set, and the lady said to me, "Do you play chess?" I said, "Well, I know a little bit about chess sets. Do we have it set up right?" I said, "No." She went and got a key, opened this cabinet and said, "Would you set it up right?" And I'm thinking, I'm not sure I want to be handling this thing, you know. That's a Franklin Mint set porcelain. It's a white bisque and a black porcelain. It's the chess set of the gods. It's Greek gods versus Roman gods. That's Swarovski crystal. That's made in Austria. And I got very lucky one time on eBay because usually they would go out of sight, and I managed to snag this one that somebody was asleep at the switch. But if you look them up today, that's another one where you want to take some bucks. This is Murano glass from Murano, Italy. It's rabbis versus rabbis. I said black versus white. This side is blue, and you can see the Torah and the shofar and stuff there. And this is the red side. Same people, but that's all hand-colored in Murano glass. This is from India. It is enamel on silver. And what's interesting is little pieces like up here, that little fringe on those umbrellas are actually hanging there, and they swing and they move. That's an interesting set. A fellow in Lancaster carved that for me, and he learned from his uncle in Chile. And if you look very close, and why the glass tubes are on there is it is so fragile. Each piece is carved out of an individual wooden matchstick, what we would call a barn burner. And I picture a guy carving these sitting there in his stool with this whole pile of broken matchsticks at his feet, thinking, oh, finally I got one. But you can see the red tips on these and the black tips on those. And if you see that in detail, the detail is just phenomenal. On the rooks, which you can't really see on this picture, it's got a drawbridge. It's like the castle. And it's got little ropes that come down, like holding the drawbridge up. Over the years, with my chess collector friends, I've probably sold maybe 10 of these to people. But every time I had to get them, I'd call my friend Juan and I'd say, can you get me 5 more sets? And he said, well, you're going to have to wait till I go back to Chile to visit my mother because my uncle makes them and I cannot have them shipped. They will all break. I have to hand carry them back. So if you want them, wait till I go visit my mother and I will bring them back for you. One day I get a phone call. He says, I got your chess sets, so I drive over and pick them up. His uncle, I'm told, carves prototypes for like McDonald's when they have the little figures in the Happy Meals and some of the little Disney figures in that. His uncle carves the prototypes for all of those patterns. This is called a Rajasthan set. It's from India. It is made of bone, and it's what they refer to, we would just say painted, but in that world, in the chess world, they called it polychrome. But that's all made out of bone and carved. But as you're seeing these, remember, because of the repetitive turning, now these aren't turned, these are carved, but remember you got 16 pawns in a set, 8 black, 8 white, and you want them all to be as similar as possible. This is an Henri set from Italy. It's probably my favorite carved set. It's called a Montsalvat set. Barbara has a smaller set from Henri that's a Charlemagne set. And what's interesting is that house also has a set for sale that is American Cowboys and Indians. This is a carving house in Italy, but they sell a set that is Cowboys and Indians. That's Burmese ivory, and that's probably 150 years old there. And you see in it some of the piercings on some of the pieces. And ivory's a whole other story. I was talking to somebody earlier that since the new ivory ban came into effect, you cannot commercially sell ivory. At one time, if you could prove it was more than 100 years old, you could still sell it. And if you bought it from Sotheby's in England, they would have in the front of their catalog that if you're going to bid on it from outside of England, you got to send the right paperwork over, which you got from the State Department here, and you had to send it over proving this. Today, commercially, you just plain cannot sell it, even within the United States. I mean, it used to be if it was here, you could sell it within, you weren't importing it or exporting it. Today, it's illegal to even sell it commercially in the United States. I could sell this set to one of you, you could sell a set like that to me, because the ivory police wouldn't even know we were doing that. But commercial, that's a problem. And I was just talking to a guy the other night, a friend of mine out on Long Island, whose home is called the Long Island Chess Museum. He's probably got close to 2,000 sets. And he told me he's got about 100 ivory sets. And for estate purposes, they just became worthless. Because when you go to value it for your estate tax, no value. You can't sell it. I looked at one for a guy and I sent a picture to my friend. He said there was a day when you probably would pay, I don't know, $1,500, $2,000 for that set. He said today you'd be lucky to get $100 for it. And I told the guy that wanted to sell it to me, I'm not interested in buying any more ivory. I've got enough and I don't want any more. This is a bone set. This style is called Salinas. It's about 1850. What's interesting in it is these tiers, like the king, the base, that stem, this, and this are all separate pieces, and they are threaded and put together. And you imagine threading bone 150 years ago and getting those threads to tap and work right. And even the pawns are two pieces. The base and the stem is all in there, threaded and screwed in there. So that's, some interesting stuff like that. This is another ivory set. It's called a puzzle ball set. There's a guy, David Springett, has a book out called, I think, Wood Turning Wizardry. He's from the UK. And he also sells a set of tools to do that. What you have here is, if you look at the ball on the bottom of the pawn, there's actually 3 balls in there, free floating. A ball within a ball within a ball. And he sells, or I think Craft Supplies sells, or Packard sells the tools to make that. The major pieces are 5. It's a ball within a ball within a ball within a ball within a ball. And all 5 of those, if you take a toothpick or something in there, you can move those around. They are all free floating in there.
What's his name again?
David Springett.
Yeah, I have that book.
His book's called, the one that shows this stuff is called Wood Turning Wizardry, I believe.
Yeah.
And he sells that tool, and you drill in, and then it splits open like that, and you got to turn it, and then you got to move that piece a little and turn it some more and move the piece.
Yeah, my dad bought that, and I always thought about getting into that someday.
Mm-hmm.
Someday.
A fellow in our club had that tool at one time, and the World Chess Museum called me in St. Louis, and they wanted to know if I could, they were having an exhibit, if I could get one of those tools for him. I might have even called a couple of you to see if you had the tool. And I called this guy in my club, and he said he doesn't have it anymore. He said, and I'll tell you one thing, and this is a guy who is an excellent turner, does really exotic stuff. He said, I probably turned 20 of those before I got one right. He said, that is really hard to do. And if this guy can't do it, I'm not spending the money for that tool, I can tell you that. This is a Hungarian set. You can tell it's Hungarian because the pawns are all smoking a pipe. But it's a nicely turned set. You can see that other than the horse's head, and even pieces of that would be turned and put together. But it's a certain style that you will find originating from Hungary. This is a Muslim set. It's bone. The Muslims, regardless of what we talk about terrorists and all that, part of their religion is you cannot depict the human form. And so a Muslim set looks like a bunch of little mushrooms. And that's basically what it is. And you can, it would be easy enough to turn because it's all straight round turning. You could use the ink to color it or whatever, but basically you don't see a king and a queen and people like that there. This is a Tagua net set. You can buy the little Tagua nets or Tagua nets out of the catalogs. You can buy them, I think, like a pound bag. It has a dozen in it or something like that. It's wood, but the faces are all, that's the Tagua nut where the faces are, and then it's painted. If you've ever turned Tagua nuts, it's a vegetable ivory. It turns like ivory. Every nut has a natural void inside it. When you start to turn, you don't know where that void is, and you might be well on your way, and all of a sudden you hit that void, and now you just have pieces on the floor. You got to go very careful. But some of the books on miniature sets have little miniature vases and things like this that are turned from those. That's olive wood from Israel. You can see the grain. Most of us have seen olive wood, like if you're making pens and things like that. You can buy the olive wood blanks and that's just a turn set. And the only thing that for me is a problem is I don't carve, so to do the horse's head is an issue. I can't come up with that. I think that's it. Okay, Lee, I need to hit input and
HDMI 2.
2
Yes.
right there. And it should come up then.
It'll come up.
Okay. Now over here, these are all sets that I have made except this one, which Barbara made. And we're going to start with a lathe duplicator, because for repetitive turning, you're talking, like I said, 16 pawns in a set. I only have one set, and I got about over 100. I only have one where the pawns are not all the same. I have one, it's a Chinese resin set. Every pawn is different. All the rest are just like what I showed you there. The pawns are the same. So repetitive turning, to get it all to look alike, becomes an issue if you're just doing it by hand. And I'm going to show you a couple different ways that I do these. And the first one is the lathe duplicator. Now, this is sort of a retrofit duplicator. I originally bought it just this top piece, the white piece, and this stuff, for a Carbotech lathe that I had. I don't know that you can buy Carbotech anymore. It had a 6-inch swing, which means from the bottom of this white piece to your center was 3 inches. So that was going to limit what you could do. Now I've got a Nova lathe, and I've demoed here and at the York Club, both of whom have jet lathes. And this one is a 16-inch swing. So I built the box, and then I put a 1-inch piece on here. So when I put it all together, I'm up to meet the 16-inch swing. If I take this piece here out and drop it down a notch, I can get to the 14-inch swing, which is what the York Club's lathe is. So I just made this up so I could mount this on it. When I sold the Carbotech, I decided I was keeping this just because of making chess pieces. But I'll tell you what else you can do with repetitive turning. Think about a Christmas ornament that you want all to look alike. The icicle or the finial could all be done with repetitive turning. It could be done here. Can be done the other ways I will show you. Toys. There's lots of toys that can be done. With this duplicator, I made this Alice in Wonderland chess set, which are these pieces right here. And I made 4 of those sets. One of them is in the Long Island Chess Museum. And that one may be going to the World Chess Museum in St. Louis, he told me the other night. And I sold one to a guy who was a member of the Lewis Carroll Society, Lewis Carroll having written Through the Looking Glass, which is the Alice in Wonderland stuff. He bought one because of that, and another gentleman out on Long Island who just recently died had bought the other one, and of course I kept one myself. What's interesting about making these, and there's drawings in here for more pieces than you need, so you can pick and choose. The guy who wrote this book did not have a lathe, so he used an electric drill and cut the head off of a screw, put it in the chuck of the drill, layered up the pieces into those, and turned it with the drill running. I don't know how many drills you would burn out trying to do that, but I would think a bunch. Anyway, that's interesting, and some of you may want to look at this anyhow, because we've talked about making the toys for Lloyd and Rod for the school. There's a lot of toy ideas in here. Also for repetitive turning, Richard Raffin has a book out, Turning Toys. In here is a book or a thing on Skittles, which is a thing you swing a thing, you make these little things and you swing it around and see how many can be knocked over. And that would be a set of them right there that you'd use for the Skittles. These little things here called Peggies actually go with a car, which I brought up, and I think John brought some too for the kids. And the cars look like that, but the little people in them are just turned with a face painted on them. And the little wheelie bug, again, the whole thing is turned. So toys, wheels, things like that you want to make for toys, little things like this in a book like this, lots of ideas. Most of this stuff you can make out of some scrap wood you got around because they're not huge pieces. The chess sets, Mike Darlow from Australia has a series of books out, one of which is called Turned Chessmen. And I've corresponded with Mike. In fact, at the Louisville Symposium, my wife and I had dinner with Mike and his wife, and we talked about the chess sets a good bit. And you see this one right down here? That is this set right here. Now, what I made there is the bases of all the pieces are sapele. The white pieces have a holly top, and the dark pieces have a kookaburra top. And that's the one I made. We're going to make a pawn from that right now. The other nice thing about Mike's book is, if you're interested, he gives you drawings for 10 or 12 sets back here. And he also has them oriented to the edge of the page, so if you're going to put them on a copier, you don't get that dumb little curve that you get when you try to copy something out of a book. You can get it flat on the glass of your copier, and you can get it, and you've got graph paper here, so you can scale your measurements. And he's got, like I say, a whole bunch of different styles in there, and you can grab a look at any of those then. But for now, we're going to do one of these. What I use for this, you go get at a hobby shop, Hobby Lobby, model airplane, model train, you get little pieces of brass or aluminum. It has to be stiff enough that it's not flexible.
Tilt it back towards you. Just tilt it back towards you.
Yeah. And what I've done here is I've taken the drawings out of that book and cut them and pasted them on the piece of brass. The way the duplicator works, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little dotted line running down here. That's 1/8 of an inch in, because on this duplicator there is 1/8 of an inch lip that it fits in there and screws down. So I made one of these for each side, and for each piece, and it really helps. In fact, I talked before on the one set for the knight, you can make the head out of a turning along with the base, so you don't have to carve a horse in order to do that. So now let's give this a try here and see how this works. The pattern is back here, oriented, turning toward me because it's clamped down inside there. There's a cutting point on here, and there's a thing, I don't know if you can, probably not. Down under here there's a thing that almost looks like the head of a screwdriver, and that's what will run against that pattern. So first I will, I'm going to define a little more where the base has to be. Now, in the interest of time, you can also taper that down so you're not taking as much off. Now I'm going to start to use that template. I could have tapered it more. Now I'm not going to take the time to part that off. but I'll show you how it's going to work then. Well, that's a little longer than I need. To make the top for it, you need to make a little ball. Some of you will know that I'm very, very good at doing that, since at one point in time I had to turn a rosary for some guy. Yeah. Anyway, the way I did for those is I took a washer, the size that I needed, and ground it down so that I left that little 1/8 of an inch in there, and then I could just mount the washer right in here and I could get that bowl. But I didn't take that down quite far enough. I drilled an 1/8 inch hole in here, and if I had taken the time to take that down further, that would have fit right on. So I just had a whole bunch of those, and at that point,
Does Penn State Industries still sell their chest set blanks, the patterns?
I don't think the chest set patterns.
They used to sell them.
They used to. They sell the duplicators, and now they have for a 10-inch swing, a 12-inch swing. They even have the bigger Vega. It's the miniature of the great big Vega, but okay, now I've got to take this apart, so you're going to have to bear with me for a few minutes. The Alice in Wonderland set over here was also made, actually, on my Carbotech lathe, using the lathe duplicator, and okay, I give up.
With a duplicator, do you plunge the chisel straight in instead of going from right to left?
I should have tapered it down more, because it doesn't quite cut real well going right to left or left to right. So I go in and make a whole bunch of lines as you saw me do. Now, what I did for
Yeah, we'll send this other that way, right there. Keep going.
all right, and in the Alice in Wonderland set, I told you the plans give you more than you need. There was a sort of a method to my madness here. So, for the knight, there he is. Since the knight jumps over other pieces when you play, I made the rabbit. This would be the template that I used, and you can see how that works right into there. And the bishops being Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Again, you can see how that fit on. I did cheat. I went out to a craft store and bought little round balls to make the head here, and I bought little hearts to make.
You did your painting. Those are really well painted. Did you do that?
I did the painting.
That's really good job.
I'll tell you one thing, the painting took far longer than the turning. And every one of my faces are different. And I sat there with a rag with mineral spirits on it, and I'd do the thing, and my sister, who's an artist, told me the easy way to do eyes and stuff is to take a paintbrush, but don't use the brush, use the little rounded end on the other end, and you get little dots that you can use. And I would do the paint, I'd look at that face and say, that's stupid. I'd grab the rag, I would wipe it right off, and I would make a new face. But what I ended up doing was, like here, I painted the flesh color in there, and then I cut out of like labels like you get at Office Max or Staples. I cut the little circles and put them over like a masking, and then I could get the red all around it. So I just made the little ovals for the face, put it on, and then I could peel it off when I was done. The rest of the pawn is just dowels put together. Again, the heart for down here. Okay, one last one that I made with the duplicator is these sets of pieces. And actually I can send a set of these around, you can see what they are. Was this set here. At one time, Rockler sold the metal parts to a chess set. It's a screw or a bolt that goes up through the bottom and screws into the top. So all you got to do is get your length correct for that. So out of those, I made all these little shapes. The only problem I had with it was they all came through in gold. And I called them up and I said, you guys don't understand. Chess is black versus white. Why are they all the same color? So at the time I had a client who, up in Hanover, who did electroplating. So I thought, well, he wasn't my client, our firm, but the partner who had him asked him, and anyway, he took a piece up. And he called me and he said, do you care if I fool around with this? We can always plate it. He said, but I think I can buff that gold off of there. So he did. I said, do it. He buffed the gold off down to the chrome or nickel, whatever that happens to be. It's not silver because it has not tarnished. And that made quite the contrast, the gold and the silver color, and then the purple heart and the yellow is Pal Amarillo, yellow wood. So I did 3 of these sets here were done using the lathe duplicator. And like I say, it is great for the repetitive stuff. When you really need, what am I, oh, I put that back on there so I won't lose it. Now I have to take it back out of there. Well, I got to put the tailstock back on anyway, so. Okay, the next way to do repetitive turning is the good old ruler and calipers. And that is how Barbara made that set there. And when she was learning to turn, and I'm a firm believer in teaching spindle turning first. You got to learn how to use the tool. I know everybody that starts out turning, oh, I want to make a bowl, I want to make a bowl, and I say, don't do it. Get a piece of wood and make firewood out of it, but learn how to cut with a skew, with a gouge, with a this, with a that. So Barbara drew this up, and in turn made this set right here. And we're going to look at a pawn just like that. And oh, that's the wrong, that's not the right thing. Ah, they usually don't go on that easy. Now, did I bring, well, before I forget it, let's put this right back.
Mine has the same thing. It's very safe to do.
Yeah, I had bought Larry's pullwood lathe, and the head on that will move. But he very wisely had drilled a hole and put a bolt up here, so you couldn't push that, because I tell you, his stepson and his son had to put it in my car, and I live in a retirement village. When I got it home, I had to make arrangements for the maintenance guys to come over, and two of them to get it out of the back of my car and get it up on the bed of the lathe. And I said, you sure don't want to slide that sucker off the end. And I bet I didn't bring, do we have a live center here?
Yeah, sure. Isn't there one down in there?
All I need it for is to make sure I'm lined up here. That's good.
So you want a smaller,
Yes, I do. I'm usually not that lucky getting these things lined up like that.
really got either one of these.
I'll take the other one, the flat one. Now, like I said, this one is just plain old caliper and ruler, except I don't know how many of you ever use a story stick, if you know what I'm talking about.
Use that in a cabin.
Great thing to make story sticks out of is go to the paint store, go to Lowe's or Home Depot and ask for a bunch of paddle the stirrers because they're flat. You can write on them. They're wide enough to put your measurements and stuff on. And what I have here is actually the 3-inch thing is for the next one. But here I've got the marks for this piece right here. And you'll see that that lines right up with this, and you can make a story stick for anything as long as you just put your little measurements on. And even if you're going to be using the calipers, which we'll have to for this, you know where to stop it at. And if you write the measurements on here, I know that my things there. Okay, and that I believe that diameter has to be 3/4 of an inch, so I should actually have set this for 3/4 first. Okay, I'm going to start where I have a line here. Okay, I give up. Okay.
Bill, I don't think your tailstop's locked in place if it's supposed to be.
Yeah. It's like the, what is it, the Nova Chuck, the one that you have to turn counterclockwise instead of clockwise to... Okay. All right, I want the bottom section to be 3/4, the next two to be 5/8. I'll make that 5/8 now. By the way, if you want to do a lot of that, instead of using the calipers, get a small open-end wrench of the size you want. Just hold it on there until it slides on and you've got it. We'll go with that. Again, I'm not going to take the time to part it all off, but
Close enough for gunner work, right?
and that now, I don't believe you used the story stick, did you? I think you did ruler and calipers for all 32 pieces. And by the way, that reminds me of another thing you can do. Barbara used the lathe duplicator for jewelry. She made earrings that were a chess piece shape. And you want to, of course you got to buy the fittings from a jewelry supplier or somebody, but she used that little pattern and made earrings to do it. And the other thing you can do is on the small stuff, now you don't want a real long piece, but rather than have a lot of waste on the end, bring it out to here. Get your first piece off, then move your duplicator, get your next piece, move it your next piece, and you have like, the only waste you're going to have is the small piece that you're using to hold it down here at the end.
Very nice.
Okay, now, some of you guys who are almost as old as me might remember the name Rudy Osolnik. Rudy made his fortune with a certain style candlestick, the very thin stem that comes out and comes up. Many years ago, in fact, I think I might be able to tell you. I thought I knew a date for this, maybe I don't. Anyway, many years ago in American, yes, if I could read without my glasses, it would be great. 1990, September, October, in American Woodworker, not Wood Turner. This was the cover on the magazine, which of course caught my eye. And in it, he tells you a way to make chess pieces by having the tools ground to the shape. So at the time I had a client that was in the cutting die industry, and cutting dies they make out of bar steel, and they heat them and bend them into shapes like a cookie cutter. They use them to cut out parts of shoes and shirts and what have you. So I asked this client if they could make this for me, and there is how that goes. And I saw some of you looking at these before, and you can look at them after. They're different shapes. This one I can tell you is the rook. And the base, well, they all have the same base on them, so it doesn't matter. The base is ground like that, and the base fits like so. Now, the one problem about this is you are now limited to this shape chess set. you can't make others like you can with the duplicator.
Do you sharpen them? Do you just hone them?
I hone them, although occasionally I don't have a Dremel tool, but I have the similar thing to it. And so I do run that around on the underside, but then I just hone the top to take the burr off. And let's now, I will use my story stick again and mark my 3 inches because that's how high I want it to be. Actually, well, for now, we'll forget about the little hole in the end there. You need to go down a little bit to allow for that hole that's there. In any case, where is this? I need to know the dimension. Well, the easier way to get the dimension is just measure one. One and a half, 1 1/4, that's about 1 5/16. So we'll just take it down to there. Little small, but it'll work. Need to get down a little further. Now measure my 3 inches. And you just need to take that down to the diameter you're looking for. Which is 1 inch. And now I'm just going to freehand out the middle. So I'm just going to get rid of that now. I don't need a duplicator for that. Rudy Osolnik was probably America's wood turner before David Ellsworth came on the scene and founded the AAW. I mean, lots of articles about him. He supposedly put his kids through college making those candlesticks. Okay, I'm not going to belabor it. Obviously, you got to sand it.
That's interesting.
I'm a little short here, but you can see, and I'm a little long going up there, but if you do your story stick right and that, you can crank them out in a hurry. But like I said, you're stuck with that shape.
Yeah.
You know, you can look at all these other things and have other shapes and sizes and what have you, and I've got all sorts of shapes and sizes at home. But if you're trying to do them, that's one way. You'd have to get your tools ground similar to that. The duplicator, like I said, Penn State Industries now has them for 10-inch and 12-inch swing, and that, I mean, they're, I don't know, 110, 120 bucks.
I paid 125 for mine.
Something like that, and that. But if you have repetitive stuff to do, a chess set, jewelry, toys, ornaments, you probably come up with more that you want to make the same for a set of gifts for people or something like that. Repetitive turning and using one of these techniques is obviously the way to go.
These tools you made, though, did you have to heat treat them or anything? The tip?
I didn't do them. They made them and gave them to me that way. It's not high-speed steel. I mean, it's bar steel. Today, you probably could get them made out of high-speed steel, and they'd hold an edge a lot better than these do. I've only made a couple of sets with that set, but each time I have to touch up the edges. Sometimes all it takes is some honing, but this time, at least for the two I was going to use tonight, I took the little rotary tool and went around the on the underside, because there's no way you can do it with a grinder. You've got to do something like that.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent.